Okay, we're going to get started. Everybody's now here. This is a city council committee meeting of the whole. We'll go over the agenda a little bit. We can have roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Here.
Mr. Matusek.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy. Here. Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Here.
Mr. Leonard.
Here.
And Ms. Williams.
Here.
Okay, thank you. If you're able, please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have an agenda, it's probably somewhere there if you folks haven't got it. I believe that the representative from the city of Toledo is still in the room.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, you're lucky because I'm not going to talk much after this. So, so what I would suggest with your review back, if you're okay with it, is we move to the city of Bowling Green water options first.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. With that, I'm going to pass it on to the mayor because you can hear him better.
This Ted here?
Yes, yes.
Ted, thanks. Would you just come up to the microphone, state your name and business address, and then we'll open the floor up to you.
Okay. Does that sound okay to everybody? Okay. Ted Bennett with Jones and Henry Engineers, and we are located at 3103 Executive Parkway in Toledo, Ohio. And I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about the presentation or the report that my company, Jones and Henry, and our partner, Raftellus Consulting, did regarding a Bowling Green water option for the communities of the city of Perrysburg, the Northwestern Water and Sewer District, and the city of Maumee. And it would be the portion of the Northwestern Water and Sewer District that currently receives water from Toledo. They have other areas that get water from a variety of other sources. So is there a pointer up here, Alice?
There is a one right there.
This here? Okay, so that might be helpful. Maybe not, but how many engineers does it take to run a plant? More than one. There it is. Okay, there. All right, so let's see. Advancing the slides. Let's see if I can do that. Well, okay, we passed the test. All right, so what was the purpose of this study? It was to look at what would be involved if for example, the city of Perrysburg, Maumee, and the district were to obtain water from the city of Bowling Green. How feasible is it? What's the cost of those sort of things? The city of Toledo's rate, as you'll hear about here in a little bit, was sort of the known factor here. That's what we were comparing with. That was something that we were told, this is what we're working with. And then obviously that doesn't require a lot of infrastructure or anything. That's already the way you get water today. So there's really no change for that. But to get water from Bowling Green, there's going to be some changes to the distribution systems in terms of more treatment, more pumping, more piping to get it to the cities. And so that's what we did. So the first thing we did was we looked at how do we get water from Bowling Green to these communities? And the thought process was, I'll point to this one if everyone wants to go to the left and look. Basically, here's the Bowling Green water plant located down here on the river. This is actually like 9 miles from Bowling Green, so it's not in Bowling Green. I don't know if most people here are familiar with the area. You'll know where it is. And then each community has what's called a clear well, where there's like a pressure break. So basically, you receive water from Toledo at these points already, each community, and there's a pressure break, and then you repump to get the water back into your systems. And so our plan was, well, let's reuse that sort of operation. Let's keep your systems the same on the distribution side, but let's just get the water to those points so that each community is going to serve from there. So there's the two Perrysburgs. One's on the east boundary, one's on west boundary. I'm sure you guys know where they are. And the cost to build this piping, ranging from 24 to 36-inch pipe, was like $65 million in like 2019 dollars. Seems like a big number, but that's what we were looking at. There was a $2 million river crossing right here, similar to what Waterville did a couple of years ago. That was actually a project that we did. It would be similar in scope of that. So that's kind of what we were looking at for the pipe route, how to get it there. And then basically everyone's going to maintain their system, downstream of that. And so The other component of that was the treatment and pumping. And we met with Bowling Green during the study, and Bowling Green had offered that they would construct the pumping and treatment aspect of this. So that was going to be constructed by Bowling Green, paid for by Bowling Green through the bulk water rates that they would be collecting from you guys and sort of internal funds. So that the cost to construct this $100 million was estimated from the previous study that was done a couple of years ago. And we just assumed that was beyond the scope of our study. The $100 million for the plant was, going to be covered by Bowling Green, if that makes sense to you guys. So what we're looking at here, and this is sort of this slide is intended to give you guys the magnitude of the cost. So this is the pipeline infrastructure here. You have millions of dollars on this axis, and this axis here shows the cost for some infrastructure. This is the pipeline infrastructure, and this is over I think this is over a 30-year period. And this is how much the cost would be for all the water. If you bought all the water from Toledo in 2019, it was something like $500 to $600 million. And if you purchased the same amount of water, all of the communities, Bowling Green, the district, and Perrysburg, if you purchased the water from Bowling Green, this was what it would cost. But the purpose of this slide was to show you that this is all about the cost of the water and less about the infrastructure. That's the key component here. Is that you'll see in a couple of different slides. We'll show you some different ways that all figures. So what we did is we looked at the rates so knowing that the water cost was the key component here, we looked at what do we know about rates and how will they project out into the future. So what we did here is we looked at Bowling Green starting here and Toledo starting here, and basically we plotted them out for a almost 30-year period, if I did my math right, actually a little more than 40. And we said, well, we know Toledo's rate will be set based on the rate proposal that Mr. Moore's going to tell you about here in a little bit, till 2041. And so we basically said, as we get out here, what do we know about rates? And so we said, well, let's apply some sort of high-low sort of rate escalations to see where it would be. So we did that with Toledo. We applied like a 3.5% and a 5.5% rate escalation at the outer bound here. And then we did the same thing with Bowling Green, but with Bowling Green, we didn't have that same sort of certainty until 2041. So we have to start pretty much at the end of like 2 or 3 years where we know the rates are set today, but beyond that, we really don't know. So with that option, we see, them sort of, these are the same shaped curves. The Bowling Green one just starts sooner and they sort of diverge. And so that's why we have sort of this unknown about the Bowling Green rate. And so that's why you see the sort of wider band in the Bowling Green rate. And so that kind of shows that comparison. And for the purposes of just sort of dollars to dollars, and I guess I should have said on that other slide, those were in cost per 100 cubic feet of water as you would purchase them from Toledo. Like whatever you do downstream, O&M and all that would be on top of this. So the Toledo water rate, I just picked year 2030. That seemed far enough out that it seems like a long time, but not so far out that we don't know. And we just did sort of a range of what the costs could be for each community, and knowing that Toledo's rate was pretty much set based on the rate proposal. Those are sort of set numbers. And then there's a range on these other numbers. And depending on where you are in the system, Perrysburg benefits a little bit by being the closest community to the BG water plant. So their costs are a little lower, as you can see there. And then the district and Maumee being a little further out, their costs are a little bit higher. So that's why you see the range. Now, it's probably important to say that these costs are based on everybody participating. If someone goes it alone, it's going to be a little bit different than what we show here. So it's sort of an all-in or nothing based on this analysis. So we looked at some pros and cons just for the sake of the discussion. Bowling Green water option, certainly good water quality. There was always some issues with that in the past, but less so now with the new treatment processes. A plus, I think, would be the city of Bowling Green builds and operates this new facility. Like, you guys don't have to add any staff in order to run this thing. A disadvantage is certainly this rate sort of unknown. And there would be sort of limited ownership and governance of this like Bowling Green plant based upon what they had explained to us, that they would sort of retain the ownership of the plant. So we looked at that as sort of a disadvantage. And there may be some overall capacity limited with the reservoirs that Bowling Green currently has, but should they expand, perhaps that's less of an issue. But the pros and cons. And then with Toledo, certainly the advantage is this long-term bulk rate is known. It's set. And the O&M and infrastructure costs are included in the rate. They have some things in there that we don't know if they'll happen, but they're included. So there's some safety factor built into that. I think comparing apples to oranges, Toledo certainly has more capacity to share than Bowling Green does as a percentage. And, a disadvantage, and I guess it's fair to say that after 2041, maybe there's some uncertainty there. We had to list something, but certainly not as much as Bowling Green. So I guess with that, sort of our result was that, the Toledo option is the least cost because you can see on those curves, it's certainly lower. There is a scenario by which the Bowling Green could be cheaper if Bowling Green were to be able to offer a sort of much lower, escalation on that rate. And then for whatever reason, if Toledo was required to escalate theirs at that high rate, there was that little area where you could see on the curve that was a possibility. And I think from a construction and sort of engineering standpoint, the Toledo option carries the least amount of unknowns because we don't have to build anything. We're basically going to run the system as it is today with the infrastructure that they currently have. So that's kind of in a nutshell, sort of boiled down to just a handful of slides, what we did with our study. And I guess would we do questions, Alice? Is that how you kind of want to do that? Okay.
Council, if they have any questions or they may want to hold them until after the Toledo presentation, but
Okay.
they may have questions as well. Go ahead.
One second. I will approach this. I've got a lot of questions. And then reviewing this here. The answers to some of my questions may be found in these exhibits, which I haven't gone over yet. Okay, so there are questions, and I apologize. It says the study assumes all three regional projects participate. Have comparisons been done for Perrysburg, if we're the only one to look at Bowling Green for water supply?
We looked at that, but we never really completed a report that if Perrysburg and Maumee were to go together, that was not really put into
Why would
it.
you not do that? It's just likely an outcome, I think. So I'd be interested in knowing the answer.
Okay.
Not so much the answer to why you didn't do that, but what the answer is if Perrysburg were to go it alone.
If I could step in on that, I was under the impression that we would have those figures included with that. I know we had talked about the Public Utilities Committee a couple times. I mentioned as well to the administration.
There are some numbers that we do have tentatively from Jones and Henry and Rectalis, but it was more about if Maumee and Perrysburg were to go without the district.
Yeah.
But we don't have anything that is just specific to the city of Perrysburg going with the Bowling Green option. That had not been contemplated when we entered into the agreement with Jones and Henry.
I understand, but I didn't see anything here that stated that with Maumee and Perrysburg, because it had been, I shouldn't say known, but there had been some rumblings that the district was going to end up potentially staying with Toledo.
There's a document that we can send under separate cover, but it's not part of this report because that was not part of the scope that we entered into with the three partners.
But I understand, I know that we had asked as a committee to have that information in front of us before we had a decision, so we could have true accurate numbers of what the infrastructure cost was going to be. I understand that that's not necessarily the most
Right.
important aspect of this, but that was one thing that the Public Utilities Committee, I don't want to speak for the other two members here, but that was one thing that we definitely wanted to have in front of us before making these decisions as well.
You will have it prior to the next Utilities Committee meeting, that's next week.
Okay.
And we can send it to all the council.
Just making
efficiently.
Yeah, basically what we did with that option is we looked at, well, how much could the pipes be made smaller? And so we brought down the infrastructure cost from the number you saw there.
When you say you brought down the infrastructure costs, are you referring to the infrastructure cost of the pipeline?
Yeah. Mhm.
What about the infrastructure cost of the city of Bowling Green? If everyone doesn't participate, it would be $100 million.
Yeah, that'd be a little,
That would lower the fall rate of water for us.
it would lower the cost. Yeah, the treatment plant expansion would be smaller, and we'd have to look at that to see what the
I think it's prudent
magnitude
for us
of
to consider
that would be.
making an informed decision. In the executive summary, you refer to the rates proposed by the city of Toledo. Are the rates proposed by the city of Toledo the rates included in the final version of the Uniform Water Purchase and Supply Agreement?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was the third year rates. I'll have some questions on that a little later.
Bear with me, because I'm not on the Public Utilities Commission.
Sure.
I'm not as informed about some of these things as some of the other folks are. Necessary capital improvements to upgrade the Bowling Green water treatment plant are assumed to be funded by the city of Bowling Green. I don't believe that's the case under the Uniform Water Purchase and Supply Agreement. So
With Bowling Green?
no, Toledo, because there could be some infrastructure improvements there. that have to do with the city.
Councilman Matuzak, can you say that again, please?
Yeah, hopefully this makes sense. I'll read what I wrote down. Necessary capital improvements to upgrade the Bowling Green water treatment plant are assumed to be funded by the city of Bowling Green, which you stated earlier. Is that necessarily the case under the Uniform Water Purchase and Supply Agreement, Toledo, the capital improvements that they're going to have to make?
The capital improvements that would be made in the city of Toledo at their plant that are common to all users are included in the rates.
Which would be comparing apples to apples, and if we were, because the PG's going to pass theirs through to us.
Correct.
Well, it's okay. Purchase water costs from Bowling Green may or may not be less than the rate per CCF offered by Toledo. What kind of guarantees, if any, is Toledo offered with the rate it provided? Against you to draw this conclusion that you reached. You said 4.6 is a no. Is that a guaranteed rate that we're going to get very through if we go to Toledo?
I guess I would let Ed speak to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, we would have the,
I'm open to whoever wants to answer the question.
what Mr. Bennett is using is the document that the technical committee, along with the city of Toledo, came up with during our 1.5-year long process of how the rates would, either if you're a Sylvania, how your rates would go down, if you're a Perrysburg or Maumee, how they would go up, and we would all meet at the same point. And that is actually a document that was actually created for the TAWA model that was talked about 2+ years ago.
So,
That is still the document that will be an exhibit to the City of Toledo agreement, which is the same document that Mr. Bennett used in this.
so is the answer to my question then that $4.60 is what it's going to be?
We will let Mr. Moore speak to that.
Only because we're comparing, we're kind of emphasizing that so much is known with the city of Toledo contract. Similar things are not necessarily known with Bowling Green, but I'm asking how known is that known number? Is that number subject to change?
I think if everybody passes it, that is the number that we use, but
That's kind of a big if.
I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but that is certainly, I think that there's a range for that, yes.
Okay. Just because the comparisons are pretty close, and some of these changes could change your conclusion. See here. Okay, so my next question was, Toledo has provided a projection of rates through 2040. And that says that under figure 1 in your study. And I guess my question was, I think you might have just answered, how is Jones and Henry assigned a degree of assurance to the projected rates provided by the city of Toledo? I think that's what we just discussed.
Yes.
There's some level of assurance, but it's based on things that aren't necessarily known.
Right, that's why I provided you guys the range
So,
in the areas where
I
we didn't
I take a little
know.
bit of issue with emphasizing that things are known in the city of Toledo, because they're not, assumptions were made. When assumptions are made, it's because things are not known. And figure 1 under the handout that you gave us,
Yeah, it's the same. I think it's the same one there. I think it's that one. Same picture? No?
Yeah, you got a footnote disclosure, says range over proposed rates including water purchase and required infrastructure financing in the year 2030. Which required infrastructure improvements are you referring to?
The pipeline.
Pipeline? Take a minute or two and kind of describe the nature and extent of the meetings with the representatives from the city of Perrysburg that you had, for instance, the number of the meetings, participants, the subject matter, examples of information obtained from the city that is used in the feasibility study.
Let's see, we met probably once a month from probably January through probably August, at least once a month, if not twice. There were a couple where we met 2 or 3 times. We had, I know at the very beginning we met with some of like Alice and Mark and just talked about, what was the goals for the city? Like, what do you guys want to achieve? What would be a possible route for sort of the pipeline going through town? We talked about those sorts of things. What are you guys comfortable with for like our projection of your water demands and that sort of things also? So sort of some big picture goals just to make sure that we understood. We did this with all 3 communities, was just to make sure that we understood what the goals were, and we were sort of attacking them on the right path, I guess.
Do you have a ballpark of how much time you spent with the representatives from the city of Perrysburg?
I would say 1 hour for each meeting, and there were, if I said there were like 8 meetings, maybe something like that.
Can the necessary infrastructure improvements be made in time to supply the district with water on the expiration of its current contract with the city of Toledo?
I guess that's yet to be determined because it would determine on when we would start. So that's sort of an unknown, I guess.
Well, given that you're the expert in the room, could it be done?
Let's see, their contract expires in 2024.
Yes.
It would be tight. It would be difficult, yeah.
I don't know if you have this information with you, but I'd be interested in knowing what Perrysburg's share of the $65 million estimated cost of the new transmission infrastructure would be. One year, your table 1 shows the length of pipe, both in terms of feet and miles. It's easy enough to break out percentage allocation of that. Is it reasonable to assume that if Perrysburg's length of pipe represents just over 30% of the total pipe, that just over 30% of the $65 million would be Perrysburg's, or somebody else would be backing off of?
I think it's in there. I apologize, I don't have the report in my hands. Yeah, it's in there, yeah. I can dig it out for you.
19.5 for Perrysburg's cost.
I think you're in the ballpark,
That
yeah.
sounds reasonable. Okay. I'm going to read you this question, but I think you answered it and said you weren't sure what the answer would be. How would the comparison change if Perrysburg were the only one to look at Bowling Green for water supply? Specifically, as it would relate to the estimated cost of the city of Bowling Green to internally fund the necessary water treatment and pumping improvements. In other words, how much, if any, of the internal funding is going to be passed on to the city of Perrysburg via the Bowling Green water rates used in comparison? I understand it sounds like 100% of that cost can be passed through.
I
I
can
guess
see
my
it.
question would change now based on your last response, that would it then also be reasonable that slightly over 30% of that cost would be ours?
It's possible. I guess we didn't look at how much with projects to expand capacity. There's sort of an economy of scale. If we were going to add enough for all 3, there's certainly some front end costs
Right.
that it may be more than 30%. Yeah.
I contemplated that. And I know you don't have exact answers for all these, but the reason I ask these questions, I've got more, is because, at least in my own opinion, it doesn't come down strictly to who's the cheapest. Okay, and if it's real close, some of these other things may come into play. And I guess I hate to look back on it 5 years from now and say, something changed that we didn't think about, and that might not have made the right decision. The Toledo water rate proposed assumes all regional customers will be purchasing water from the city of Toledo. If that doesn't turn out to be the case, in comparison of its rates to those from Bowling Green, might suggest a different conclusion than that expressed in the executive summary. I want to check 2, your modeling. It says, my question is, please explain, or I'm asking you, please explain the significance of developing a hydraulic model versus some other paper model. I'm
Okay.
not an engineer, I don't know if there's some significance to that.
The hydraulic model was something that the engineers that we did, Raftellus was sort of the rate consultants, and we did that to size the pipes so that we knew how big the pipes needed to be to deliver the water to each of your communities at your tap location. So
Is the hydraulic describe the type of model, the type of the system that the model is?
the system, yeah, it's the water system, yeah. Uh-huh.
What would be another type of model other than hydraulic?
That would be the only way we would size, yeah. Mhm.
And the rates offered by the city of Toledo also been used, also based on the projected maximum demand values listed in the 2017 study.
Yes, yeah, we use the old numbers and we felt comfortable with those.
And then, still under the modeling, paragraph of chapter 2, is it reasonable to conclude that the estimated costs associated with the conservative approach described in the second paragraph of page 6 represents the high end of estimated costs?
Yeah, we actually provided the costs as a range in there with we apply a contingency for sort of unknowns, and we looked at it with a 15 and a 20% contingency. So the 65 is I believe on the high end. I think 66 was the 20% contingency number, and if my memory serves, it was like in the 63 range for the 15%, if my memory serves. So we gave you a range on
So
those.
this is a contingency, which is an unknown. If that unknown doesn't materialize, and any type of sensitivity analysis would show the effect that would have on your conclusion.
I don't believe it would have much. Looking at that sort of graph chart where you saw how much the water, yeah, I think so. I think the water cost is the big one.
I didn't know that when I wrote this question, but
That's okay.
I'm learning.
Yeah, well, I didn't have that in the paper either. Sure.
Under the treatment and pumping considerations, it says $100 million for new treatment and pump infrastructure costs are assumed to be included in the bulk water rate for water purchase from Bowling Green. You've answered half of this question already. Is the assumption that the cost of the improvements are included in the bulk rate, or is the assumption that the cost of the improvements will be $100 million?
Our assumption is that Bowling Green would fund those
And that the
internally.
cost would be $100 million, and that they would be included in the bulk rates.
Yeah, yeah. And that was based on a meeting with the city.
Did you again, do any kind of sensitivity analysis to break out what the effect there would be on your conclusion if that $100 million were to be plus or minus 10% or 15% or 20%?
No, it was beyond the scope of what we were, it was beyond the scope of the study to look at the treatment.
Okay. Who gave you the scope of the study?
It was based upon what we sort of had agreed upon
The
with
scope of
the
the study
city.
was to enable the city council to make an informed decision. The overall scope. And I think these things that come into play here can all change, but they can all change in favor of this. For diseases, they can change, to our detriment. So what I would prefer to see, if you'd be willing to do it, is to break your unknowns down to Bowling Green into component pieces, so that we can determine whether or not we think these assumptions are going to play out, and if so, how they affect the conclusion that we've reached. As you start to pile on all these assumptions and take a conservative approach and assume the worst case scenario in all of them, you reach a conclusion that feels better. But if those assumptions don't materialize, then you've given us a report of that conclusion. And I'm going to pass the microphone to someone else.
I was just, tomorrow we're gonna find out. We're gonna have Bridget ask Alice what exactly council requested to do. We recall that we asked for several phases of testing to be done by the consultants. The council only paid for a portion of that, so, I'll just be mindful of that.
Appreciate it. I just need to rest, so I'm going to let somebody else talk for a while.
I do have a couple quick questions on the report. On page 13, on chapter 34, the financial analysis, I know that it stated here that the generic industry assumption is up to 5.5% increases. I'm just kind of curious, is that something that you've seen historically across regions, or?
We're relying upon Raftellus, who's our sort of our rate expert, and they pick those. And you're right, they're looking sort of like what are the high and low sort of end on rates
It's the
typically.
low end of the 3.6%.
The 3.5. Mhm.
When looking at that as well, was there any historical research done on the rates that BG was typically charging?
We did.
Recently, just a couple years ago, they didn't have the 6% rate hike going up until 2022. After that,
Yeah, that's why.
It's going to level out, or if it's going to take off.
Sure.
And I was curious to see historically what you've seen from BG on that, as well as I know historically we've seen from Toledo.
Mhm.
I think for several years, at least when I first got on, it was a typically 13% increase. But I'm not sure if that is, it was typically 13%. And when we did our water rate study, sorry, this Tuesday just had, it said 13%. So I know when we initially had the water rate study redone, it was for several years the city of Perrysburg was actually eating that 13%, not passing that on to the residents, which is why some of the residents were kind of surprised when the rate study came back with some heavier increases because the funds started to dwindle away. So I'd be curious to see, looking at the historical side of things. As I'm reading on one of the articles that was done on that. I have that here right now to make sure I had my facts straight. And it'd be curious to see if that's a trend that's going to continue, or if it's an anomaly amongst the historical trend.
Okay. It's not in there yet, so I can't comment on it. Yeah.
And I understand.
Yeah.
If someone wants to ask a question, get all the questions in different pages, so I have to kind of hunt for things.
I would just ask, so what do you attribute the volatility or the rate of escalation to be so significantly different at Bowling Green than it is? Or what attributes to our lack of knowledge about the stability there?
I guess part of it is how they figure their rate. It was not a method that our rate consultant was he'd not seen that method a lot, and so it was hard for him to understand how they were getting to their rate with the way that it's calculated. And admittedly, digging in and looking at BG's rate and how it was developed was sort of beyond the scope here. So in fairness, we applied the same escalation factor to both options, starting at the point where we knew the number, as far out as we could project it. I think we thought that was fair to apply the same rate escalations, because both communities are going to be subject to similar, regulations, requirements, and
And I agree with that.
infrastructure.
We want to use the same escalation rate. But I'm just curious as to why the Bowling Green escalates. Looking at that chart, there's something that's anticipated or unknown that will cause that to increase so much.
Okay, good question though. So basically, if you were to take this point here and point it here, they're actually the same shape. It looks different, but like this is this sort of like fish mouth, I guess. Starting right here.
What was the last word you just used?
Like a fish mouth or something.
Okay.
Something like, I was trying to use like the greater than or less than. I don't know. But like they're basically the same shape, but it depends on where we start. With Bowling Green, we have to start where we know the rates with certainty, and so then we just sort of diverge, and so that's why we see the difference there. Does that make sense?
No, I'm still not clear as to what's causing that divergence. I mean,
Okay.
It's just me, I'm sure.
Okay, so what we did, so this is the high rate. This is the 5.5%, and then this is the 3.5% for Bowling Green, basically. Make sure I do this right. But basically, this is the sort of high range, low range. Likely it'll be somewhere in there. It'll be somewhere in that window is what we're projecting. And the same is true for Toledo. That it'll be somewhere in the window. But it looks far worse for Bowling Green just because it starts the sort of divergence in the model starts sooner in time.
Just greater variance or something.
Yeah. It's the same percentage applied. It's just you start
If you
sooner.
think about it in terms of money, this might help. You got two people investing $10,000, but one invests before the other one does, and they both get the same rate of return. The first one invests is going to continue to grow at a faster rate because it's going to compound quicker.
Right.
And that's based on an assumption that you made.
Right.
The assumption was, since you're not familiar with the way
That's a good analogy, yeah.
Any other questions, John?
Actually, the only question that I had on here was I know that with and this will probably come more from Toledo, with the 1% increase that is anticipated over the course of what is known, on your experience, is that something that you've seen in other water districts, or is that something that is more on the lower end?
I guess I don't really want to speak for.
I understand that. I know 5.5,
Yeah.
0.6 to 5.5 is a typical average, is what you said from the information we got. The 1% is below
Yeah.
that average from the.
I guess I'm afraid if I answer that, I'll be belittling. The technical committee did a lot of work to develop those rates. I don't want to speak to that and be around.
Do you have any other questions? Anybody?
I have a question. Can we go back to the slide with the pipeline?
Yeah. There you go.
So coming from the intake there by the river up to Perrysburg, that's a 36-inch line, right?
That's correct. Yes,
Right.
sir.
And then it stays 36 all the way until it hits that line, and either 30 or 24.
Yeah, I believe this was 24, if my memory serves, and I believe this was 30, if my memory serves.
E1 and
I may have to, yeah, you may be looking at it. It's all right.
yeah, you're right.
I trust
Going
you.
to Long Beach 24, going to Rockford. My question is, you had mentioned earlier that when Jim mentioned, well, what if it was Harrisburg by ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
You said, well, possibly that pipeline would be smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be a smart move? Just in case, if
You always like to make things just a little bit bigger.
Right.
It wouldn't need to be 36, but that's
yeah,
fair to say.
how much? It wouldn't be that big of a difference in cost to go from 36 to 30.
Admittedly, yeah, you'd probably want to build some capacity, and
Right.
once you're building it, the cost of the pipe's a very small portion of the construction.
That's right.
Getting everything started
I would
with it,
think
so
that he would drop it.
you
That's
might-
not going to change
yeah.
that. That would not change our cost of infrastructure if we went by ourselves.
Yes.
We would definitely save that same size. All right.
It'd be safe to do that.
Wanted to just clear that. But I had other questions, but Jim pretty much covered it.
Okay.
Sorry. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
I thank you for your questions, and I thank you for the thoughtful review of the report. I can tell you've read it, and I do appreciate that. So I guess with that, we'll turn it over to our next speaker. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. You can stay, correct?
Okay.
Okay. We'll have the Representative Ed Moore, the City of Toledo, Director of Public Utilities. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, members of council. I'm Ed Moore, I'm Director of Public Utilities for the City of Toledo. I did not bring a PowerPoint, but I do have some handouts for you. The graphs that I brought, I didn't realize your screen was that big, first of all, so I thought it'd be better to print them out. You can take a look at. There's some extras if we need to pass them around in the audience also.
All right. Ed, would you mind just saying your name and address for the record so we're sure it's all together?
Ed Moore, Edmoore, Director of Public Utilities, City of Toledo, 420 Madison Avenue, Toledo, Ohio, 43604.
I think we're ready.
Thank you, sir. Again, Ed Moore, City of Toledo Department of Public Utilities. As many of the council members may know, that over the past few years, Toledo and our contract communities have worked very hard to try to come to an understanding and agreement about how we deal with water issues in our region. So the jurisdictions that we've worked with over these past few years include Fulton County, Lucas County, the city of Maumee, Monroe County, city of Perrysburg, Northwest Water and Sewer, and also the South County Water System in Monroe, Michigan. In response to those discussions, Toledo amended its charter last year to create Chapter 15 of our charter, and that was on November 6th of 2018, and that established the Regional Water Commission. So a couple of the things that we heard as we talked to our contract community was the communities were looking for a meaningful voice in governance. So this was Mayor Kapsikavich's way of creating a meaningful voice in governance for our partners in the water system so that we all can work together to maintain the system and also to plan for the future as far as infrastructure improvements are concerned. So we thought that was a good first step to get us on the right track towards creating the Regional Water Commission. One of the things I will say is that over the years, even as we had negotiations, we went through the whole TAWA phase, the Regional Water Advisory Board, which consisted of essentially the same members that are going to be a part of this Regional Water Commission if the communities decide to join into the uniform water contracts, we never stopped working. We all, a lot of the committee members are here now. We always stayed at the table. We tried to keep a level head as far as how we're going to solve some problems. So I'm real excited of the potential of the Regional Water Commission because of the people who make it up. They are true water professionals, people who understand how water systems operate. It will be a big help to myself as I'm tasked with running Toledo's water system. Now I'll have a full panel of professional water engineers and professionals to help the city of Toledo make decisions as far as how we do infrastructure improvements and as we move forward. So in my opinion, that would be a very big plus for the entire region. Some of the duties of the Regional Water Commission include, and I think the gentleman from Jones and Henry discussed some of these options also, so I don't think I have to go through all of them, but we'll be a public body with open meetings and open records. We'll submit rate adjustments and recommendations to the City Council of the City of Toledo for approval. That approval will be mandated to be 3/4 of the City Council of the City of Toledo in order to make it effective. And also, there's a stipulation that says after 45 days, it automatically becomes effective. The commission will review capital improvement budgets of the water treatment plant itself. Myself and the Commissioner of Plant Operations will be on the committee along with, again, utility professionals from all of the contract communities who decide to enter into a uniform water agreement. The makeup of the committee, as I just mentioned, myself, two people from Toledo and one from each of the suburban communities. Some of the goals include creating uniform rates. We think the commission will give us long-term stability in the region as far as how water is administered. And we'll also explore regional redundancy in an agreement that we have with Ohio EPA. We're mandated to have a redundancy plan to the Ohio EPA by December of 2020. That's well underway. We've hired Arcadis to do the study for us. So we anticipate we'll have that plan completed and submitted to Ohio EPA by December of 2020. One of the things that will come out of that study is Ohio EPA is requesting that we build additional storage capacity in our system that is built into these rates. I want to be clear about that. The additional capacity as far as elevated storage and then an additional intake is already included in the rates. $100 million for an intake, and another $70 million for elevated storage. So the rates that we presented already have that expense included in the plan. So one thing I wanted to go over with you guys is the water infrastructure improvements that we're undertaking now. There are a couple questions and comments related to infrastructure and what we're doing out at the Collins Park Water Treatment Plant. As many of you may know, we're in the 8th year of a 12-year improvement plan. We're moving right along. If you look at there is a spreadsheet that you have that kind of outlines some of the sources and uses of funds as far as what we're doing in the city of Toledo. So that is a real good indication. This comes out every quarter. We put this out. It's on our city's website, the ToledoH2O.com website. But this is a full summary of everything that's going on out at Collins Park Water Treatment Plant. What I'll say right now is some of the bigger projects we have going on is the ozonation system that is underway. We will have it online by the HAB season of 2020. So we're through the rough part of the HAB season for 2019. So next year we'll have HAB online, and I can guarantee myself I'll breathe a little easier as far as worried about algae or whatever else may be out in Lake Erie. So real happy to announce that we're getting ready to kick off our program for the revamp of all of our filters, our filter galleries. $40+ million project that's going to be funded through Ohio EPA, also through Ursula loans. So we're moving forward with that. Basin 7 and 8, the expansion of the plant that started, I believe it was a couple years ago, 2016 or 2017. It's getting close to be completed as well. So if you haven't been out to the plant in a while, please get a hold of me, come out there, take a look at the plant. A lot of activity going on right now, but as you can see through that diagram, it'll give you a real good summary of everything we're doing out at the Collins Park Water Treatment Plant. So as far as the rates are concerned, I wanted to talk a little bit about rates also. So one of the big features of what we're trying to do under this new uniform rate structure is we're adjusting and we're going to a cost of service rate structure. So we've worked closely for many months with all of our regional water partners, including Perrysburg's own Alice Gotzi and Bridget Cabot, to design new simplified rate structures that conform to industry best practices. Every aspect of Toledo water operations was painstakingly reviewed through a true cost of service process to arrive at the draft rates and transition schedules that are being presented today. This was not the work of Toledo alone. This is a big difference from what it was done in the past. It was essentially Toledo designing rates and saying, here, community, this is what your rate is going to be based on what Toledo calculates. This rate, everything you see here today was based on the Regional Water Advisory Board. All of us sitting down in a room over at my office, cramming rates. We went through Toledo's budget line by line, disclosed all the information that we had as far as how rates are developed. So in the past, we may not have analyzed rates for the contract communities, but this time we said, let's analyze the rates. Everyone sits down and understands how this budget is built, so then we can make rational decisions on what costs are associated with what communities. So the beauty of a cost of service structure is you as a contract community are only paying for the commodities or the services that you use. So in the past, you may have paid for some of Toledo's operations and maintenance. You may have paid for billing and collections because of the different type of structure that it was. So under this structure, you only pay a wholesale rate based on the services that you use, which is essentially the cost of pulling water out of the lake, treating it at the Collins Park Water Treatment Plant, and then distribute it to a master meter to get to your community. So I'm really proud of the work that the advisory board did. And again, we put a lot of hours into it. We developed the rates. We got the lawyers involved with it also, so they worked on the contract language as we developed rates, and then we brought it all together. So it was probably a good year and a half that we just sat up and met, time after time to try to figure out what these rates would look like. So again, that was the cost of service structure. It'll be 2 retail rates, which is 2 Toledo retail rates, and then a wholesale rate for the contract communities. Based on the cost of service structure, that wholesale rate is going to be cheaper than what Toledo's retail rate is, because the services that we use, such as customer service, billing, and operations and maintenance of our local system, have to be added on to the top of the wholesale rate. You, as a contract community, in turn, have the ability to generate revenue to pay for your local costs through a separate charge. So that is the true definition of what a cost of service structure looks like. So as a retail customer of the Toledo system, which Toledoans will be, our rates will always be higher than what your wholesale rate is. And I'm sure you'll have more questions associated with that, but the first retail rate for Toledo is essentially 50% of our consumption, and that is the customers that use less than 160,000 cubic feet a month. In the past, we've called it an industrial rate or a high volume rate. Those are our customers that are over 160,000 cubic feet a month, and that's 22% of our consumption. And then there's the wholesale rate, which are the contract communities, the master meter customers, they're 28% of consumption. So again, we really dove deep into the weeds on what the rate should look like based on true cost of service and cost allocation. And also another big feature of what the wholesale rate would be is the elimination of the 75%, well, not necessarily 75, but there are 30 and 40% surcharges as well. So a big decision that the city of Toledo made is, again, we're going to have a true cost of service structure. We have to get rid of surcharges. Again, you're only going to pay for the services that you use. So communities like Perrysburg that may be paying 30 or 40% surcharge, that'll be eliminated over a 7-year period. What we did is the number we used was we did not want to exceed 10% for the retail rate of the city of Toledo. So what we did is ran the math based on capping Toledo at 10%, and then what it is it took 7 years to get us out of that surcharge. So for all of the communities, it's going to be a rough 7 years because we do have some major fundamental shifts of the way we allocate costs that have to be eliminated over this 7-year period. But what I can say is after we're out of that transition period, rates level off dramatically. We're talking 1 to 2% increases potentially out to 2040. So I'm really happy about that. It is the way a system should be ran. So it took us a little while to get there, but I think we have a structure that works for everyone. Some of the assumptions that are associated with our rate model is we built in a 3.5% annual increase in operating expenses. We accounted for a reduction of consumption in customer accounts to mirror future population projections. We also designed and constructed an additional lake area intake, as I mentioned before, and then also the distribution system and the elevated storage that's built into the payment, into the rate. And then what I will say is the gentleman from Jones and Henry talked about Toledo's rate being steady out to 2041. We expect a significant drop off in debt in the years 2038 and 2042. As you'll see by the rate graph that I showed you, you'll see it climbing. But then what happens is you get out and a lot of this debt starts falling off based on the $500 million program, improvement program that we're doing now. So we are really comfortable with the structure itself and how rates will formulate over the next 20 to 30 years. So in conclusion, I would just say I appreciate the opportunity to come to Perrysburg and talk. I think we should do it more often. I really do. But the one thing we heard from the contract communities is you guys wanted a meaningful voice in governance that did not go on deaf ears. Again, the mayor's position was, if that's what it takes to get this deal done, we have to figure something out. So the solution was Chapter 15 of the charter amendment there. So through the Regional Water Commission, important decisions about the operation and development of the water system will be done in a collaborative manner with the area's top water professionals, all working together to solve problems and plan for the future. This plan would also deliver high-quality water at the least cost and least uncertainty heading into the future. So again, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I appreciate the invite to come talk, and I'll listen. I'll take your questions at this time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out, even though we're sure we'd like to see more of them, maybe we'll make sure the traffic is a little easier.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that. We will turn it over to council members to ask questions.
Mr. Moore, wouldn't you say we currently already have a regional water system? It's just kind of a matter of semantics.
Yes, actually, through our bond rating, we are classified as a regional water system. But I'm glad you brought that up. There's one important point about that. With the regional water uniform contracts coming together, if we find a way to keep everyone together, that bond rating only gets stronger, because you'll have brand new 40-year contracts, and you'll have a real regional definition to what we're trying to do. All of the improvements are built in, so we're really excited about the opportunity here. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Jeff.
So thank you for coming.
Yes, sir.
What assurances do we have that council will actually listen to the commission?
The assurance is, we looked at it from a political perspective of, a lot of times, as far as the professionals as a part of the Regional Water Commission are making the recommendations. I think it really comes down to, as the group, as it grows and establishes credibility, I don't think you're gonna have many issues. The City Toledo Council, and I'll be clear about this, they've never been an obstructionist for what we've tried to do in Toledo. Most of the time it's the elected official, and I probably am speaking out of turn here, but we haven't had a lot of issues with Toledo City Council saying we don't support what you're trying to do. A lot of times it's just trying to get it off the ground, which is what we experienced some years back as we fell behind on improvements to the plant. I'll say this general plan that's in place right now, it is approved through Ohio EPA $500 million project. It's legislated already. That money has already been allocated. There are going to be a couple, maybe another bond issuance associated with that $500 million, but it's mandated through Ohio EPA, so you're not going to get pushback there. I would say that the process just has to play itself out. Obviously, I can't make you any guarantees based on what City Council will or will not do, but based on the history that I have working with them, we have an excellent utilities committee chairman who really pushes for things we're trying to do, and I just haven't had much resistance from our City Council at all.
And really, one of the reasons I asked that was you described, if I understood you right, was that 3/4 of the council has to agree. And if not, then in 45 days, then that rate is set by the commission, or is that, did I hear you right?
Yes, if they take no action in 45 days, it becomes, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. I brought back up, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm Eileen Granada, I'm an attorney with the City of Toledo. What the charter says is that the 3/4 is needed to override the rule of the commission. So you need a 3/4 vote of council to override anything the commission recommendation. So what happens, generally speaking, and what we think will most likely happen, is the commission will make a recommendation. It'll get put in ordinance form. 45 days later, council doesn't have to act on it, and it becomes instituted. So the 3/4 is really putting a very high threshold for council to have to override the commission. And that's kind of unlikely.
Why would we want to provide for that scenario? If you just explain to us the benefits of having this professional technical.
Well, I think there's balances on both sides of this in terms of protecting the contracting communities by trying to make sure that the commission has authority, but you also, in the end, have to protect. The City of Toledo is on the bonds, and the those bonds have to be put into the rates.
Is that required by non-council to do that?
That's one of the discussions we had with council, yes, is that we had to have the authority to set the rates to cover the costs.
Was that required by non-council to do that?
It was part of our discussions with bond council and their recommendation, yes.
Or it wasn't required by?
I don't know what you mean by required. I mean, all I'm saying is bond council said it was important that we had that. Okay, so the idea is that we have to have the authority to make sure that we are covering our costs on the water system. And so that's what that 3/4, the only way that you do that is if you really pretty much got a unanimous vote and that the commission would not recommend a rate that in fact covers the cost. That would put the system in jeopardy and we would have to take action at that point. Beyond that, it's not very likely at all, particularly, I don't know how, necessarily how every council operates, but to get to a 3/4 to get to 3/4 vote to override a recommendation of an independent body is a pretty tough sell politically.
Is it possible that they could have a 3/4 vote if the recommendation by the technical committee doesn't jeopardize the budget?
Well, it would depend. I suppose it could if you had a disagreement about a capital expenditure that needed to be made and whether it was mandated or not by the EPA. But there is a protection in terms of the rates. The council is bound to the contract terms, and the contract's terms say it's a cost of service.
Okay. Who appoints the professionals to the technical committee? Who makes that decision? It's probably independent, but I don't know the answer to that question.
We have our own opportunity, our own person. Yeah.
I think the agreement states that it is the director of public utilities or the like, such as a sanitary engineer in the case of accountant.
But that's within our control.
And you said there's 3 people from the city of Toledo, including yourself, Mr. Moore?
2, one other, myself and then my commissioner of plant operations. Correct.
And how many are on the committee?
9 total.
Okay. And how was it decided that you would have 2 and everyone else would have 1? What's that based on?
Well, essentially, it's in the idea of cooperation. We expect to have unanimous votes every time. Again, if it's a situation where we disagree on something, Toledo still has the end vote. So the makeup of the commission, the board, the commission is not as important as it would have been under the terms of TAWA. So we thought we could show a little leniency in that area as far as how we make up the board. I think we felt comfortable with 2 votes from Toledo.
You say Toledo as the decision, Toledo City Council,
Toledo City Council, yes.
but only if the committee comes up with a recommendation that jeopardizes the budget.
Correct.
Well, as you noted, that was a negotiated item, and that was important to the municipalities that Toledo did not have a charter-like vote control. So they had 2 votes, and he outlined Sylvania, Lummi, White House, and all of us got a vote. So that's how we made up.
I just have one additional question.
Sure.
You talked about 170 million for the future intake.
Correct.
That was included in the current rate, or it's anticipated to be part of the future rate?
It's in the rate that you have right now as part of that rate graph. That 170 million is calculated in there, but we did delay the implementation of when that debt service would start. So they're staggered debt service payment dates in there.
So we're kind of pre-funding it per se, but the one of the surprises when it's already.
Correct. And again, it was a part of the big conversation was, and I'll just use Mayor Stahl as an example from Sylvania. He was really, really adamant that we have a plan for redundancy and safety of the system. So again, we talked with Ohio EPA, got a real good understanding of what their expectations were of a redundancy in our system. So we're entering into a general plan on redundancy, and thus you have the cost, the expense already in the rate.
He understated how adamant he was about that.
Exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for coming out, and also thank you for inviting all of us in council to come to the plant. It was a great opportunity to see exactly how the Toledo plant works, and I also kind of that we did get an opportunity to review as well. So it was nice to be able to compare the two plants to see how each one operates and so forth.
Thank you.
Going on the conversation of redundancy, I know in the original TAWA discussion there was a recommendation made on redundancy in the actual plant itself. Is that something that is going to be thought of moving forward? I know that the Regional Chamber of Commerce, as well as the consultant that was hired during that time, had made that suggestion, and I did not believe that that was included in the rates. But is that something that is going to be discussed moving forward in the event of some unlikely scenario where the Toledo water plant goes down?
Sure. I'm going to ask Warren Henry to come up to the stand here, the architect of the improvements at our plant. So, Mr. Henry.
Well, I'm Warren Henry, administrator with Division of Water Treatment. I live in Sylvania Township, so that's kind of gives you a perspective of background here. As far as, I want to make sure I understand your question as far as redundancy, rather than speaking in general terms. Could you repeat your question so I'm clear?
So when the town conversation was initially going on, the Regional Chamber of Commerce, as well as I believe the consultant, had discussed redundancy in the actual plant operation itself, having a secondary plant in another location in the event that there was the unlikely scenario of a event that actually shut down the plant, whether it's tornado, natural disaster, maybe some contaminant or something else that would cause the plant to be shut down for several days.
Right. Okay, yes, and that is the plan that's being studied right now. That's the plan that the director was mentioning had to be completed by December of 2020. There are many, many options that are being considered. We'll see what the consultant comes up with and recommendations. It includes a risk analysis and a vulnerability analysis of the assets that are in place. And based on what's being considered, which includes going up to Detroit, coming from the Detroit River, the second intake in Lake Erie, other options as well that are on the table just for local source and interconnections as well. So there's a lot of potentials that are there, and we'll see where we go with the technical committee. That's the purpose of the technical committee. And the Water Commission is doing this in partnership with our partner communities, developing that plan together with the consultant. So that plans to be submitted by December, as I say, of next year. And then from there, of course, we get into conversations with the Ohio EP. Actually, they're part of the partnership in developing the plan and getting there. So we expect not cooperation, but affirmation, I think would be a better word. When we get to the end of that road, that the EPA will be on board with it, with the conclusion.
So with the second part of my question, is that redundancy, I know that the numbers aren't there and things haven't been selected on that. The way I understand it, that would not be included in the actual current rates that are being presented.
Yes, it is. We have built in $100 million for that redundancy. And it was based largely on studies that previously been done by the city of Sylvania in trying to tapping a water supply from western Lake Erie. So based on some of the alternatives that have been looked at and some of the prior work, the early work that was done for Northwest Water and Sewer for the city of Sylvania, South County Monroe, that's where those dollars came from. And yes, it is built into the projected rate structure.
Okay, because I'm trying to pull up here, and I think it was.
Yes, but not, if you're asking if it's a new plant, no, it's not a new plant. It's a second alternative source of water.
Okay.
And it could come from a raw water supply, which is one option, or a treated water supply, which might be the city of Detroit or other options as well.
So what the study is being done in 2020 is to look at an alternative water source, not necessarily a secondary treatment, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, looking at those who were involved in the conversation early on as well in our administration. I was also under the impression that there was some conversation of the secondary plants as a possible consideration.
Yeah, they're looking at both. The scope of the work is to look at both the alternate water supply, raw water supply, and a second treated water supply. It's both.
Okay, and is the $100 million that's set aside for this alternative water source, according to the E, is that a overestimation or is that pretty accurate? I know I'm giving you something, I don't know the answer.
An estimate is an estimate. Yeah, an estimate is an estimate. I will say that the estimates that we've prepared to date for our program have been on target. Our studies have backed it up, and the plans have been developed have been in line, and the bids we received have been competitive, and yes, we're moving right along on schedule and under budget. So I think it's reasonable.
Okay, but so it's not that we wouldn't go until 2020
Right.
or 2021 was the
Premise of the allocation now, as I know, I talked to Gustavo about this, is that calculation is based on a conservative estimate. What the cost would be is not anticipated. That would be understood. It's anticipating a larger cost. You're being conservative in your approach.
Correct.
That's what I put it, but okay, sure. That's fine.
I kind of want to have a follow-up question
Sure.
to Jonathan's question. You said there are two things being considered, redundant water source and possible plant. Correct?
That's correct.
What kind of numbers are we talking about with this possible plant?
Well, as far as the plant, we're looking at not a full capacity plant. Obviously, it would not be good use of taxpayer dollars to build a redundant plant with the same capacity and have all that excess capacity. So we're looking at a second treatment facility or second source that we can get to for treated water that would meet the average daily demands is what we're looking for the system.
Do you have an estimate what that cost would be?
Again, I don't. And that,
Ballpark of $100 million?
well, that's what's budgeted, and it depends upon where it's at and the transmission mains that have to get there. Could it be less than that? Yes. Could it be more than that? Yes. But we haven't even done the study yet, so we have to do the study and then we'll go from there.
So-
But keep in mind that we're looking at $500 million of capital improvements right now. We got a budget, we have economies of scale to work with here. So we're looking at $100 million a year of our operating and debt service costs. So if it's more than that, will it be a significant hit to the impact of the rates? No. Will it increase? Yeah, but it's a matter of magnitude, elasticity, if you will.
So when you say it would affect the rates, if there were to be a secondary treatment, I guess we call it a water treatment facility, that would be passed through to the regional partners?
To all the customers in the region, yes.
So when we had the gentleman from Bowling Green up there, and I grilled him on the flux analysis of the rate that he used based on these unknowns, and that's an unknown. Any idea what kind of adjustment that would have in the rate one way or the other?
To stand up here off the top of my head, no.
So you weren't the number cruncher?
Pardon me?
You weren't the number cruncher that came up?
I mean, yeah,
That's something I would like to know, though.
Sure,
Because that's
yeah.
something that's probably going to happen, and it's
Right.
going to cost us something, we don't know what's going to cost.
in 30
It's
minutes.
going to change the rates, and it goes back to my question of, what's the assurance that $4.60 is going to be $4.60, and it sounds like right now, it's a good chance it won't be $4.60, it's going to be more, because
Well, right.
you don't have the number for that big in your rate right now.
Yeah.
What you're studying.
You look at it, about $80,000 a year per $1 million that you go out there and borrow. So, it kind of gives you a sense, and we're talking $100 million a year in budget, so you can kind of get a sense of the impact to the actual rate structure. It's not huge, let's put it that way. Because the economies of
To the extent I
scale.
can cast my vote based on something other than a sense of something, I'd like to be able to do that.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if you don't mind, I'll just add a couple things to that. That $170 million that I talked about was essentially the estimate for a second intake, which was $100 million, and $70 million for elevated storage. Now, the conversation we've had in the Regional Water Advisory Board is, let's get the redundancy we need now. And after talking to Ohio EPA as well, they're not expecting us to build a second plant. Now, anytime we decide as the Regional Water Commission that now is time, we're going to be sensitive to rates. We're going to be sensitive to what the ratepayers have to pay for that. We're going to pay off some debt. I would assume that a second plant, if needed, would come into the future. I'm not talking in the next 10 years. But that $170 million was not intended to build a new plant. So I just want to be clear about that.
Okay, I'm not arguing the necessity for having one, not having one.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I'm comparing apples to apples when I'm comparing.
Absolutely. And with that being said, I would say our estimations are very reasonable.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Would it be clear to say that it appears that more customers who are part of the Toledo Regional Water System, it would be cheaper for them and the customers?
Absolutely. And that's with any water system. The more people participate, the lower the rates are to everyone. And you talked with the gentleman from Jones and Henry earlier about the rates themselves. And it is, those estimates are based on everyone coming in, because that's the only thing we have right now is as a reasonable estimate is to say, here's what your rate could be based on everyone coming in. So what we did is said, here's that rate. We went to our city council. We got it approved based on that estimate so that we could keep this conversation moving. Now we're here asking the contract communities to do the same. We went out on a limb, so it's the only thing we have until until the communities actually sign the document. And then when those documents are signed, based on who's in and who's out, we'll go back to the drawing board. But right now, we can say that's what your rate will be if everyone comes in. I can't guarantee that because I can't guarantee that everyone will come in. I'm feeling pretty confident that we'll keep most of our customers. Lucas County's already signed on. South County, Monroe is voting tonight. I'm getting a real good vibe from them as well. The two of them, we're 80% of our system right there, just with those two customers. And then it's just the other little pieces that fill out the other 20%, such as Perrysburg had about 5%, I think it is. So the more the merrier, definitely.
Thank you.
I do have some other questions here as well. Going to some of the areas down here talking about the rates.
Sure.
Is on exhibit page, let me look this up here. There's a lot of papers that we have here. Probably took several trees to burn everything off. The first question is with the exhibit H, which is the equalization aspect on the backside.
Sure.
Are the rates on this utilities guaranteed if all the communities move forward? And I think that you just answered that. Or is that something that can potentially change even if all the communities move forward?
No, we feel very confident that that'll be the wholesale rate as everyone comes in. Now, the retail rates for Toledo will fluctuate because we still have to figure out what exact programs we're going to fund for the ratepayers of Toledo, such as a customer assistance program, lead service line replacement, all of those things that make up a low-income affordability program. We still have to design that on the retail side, but the beauty of this structure is we can do that in the Toledo end because it's just on our backs, and we can guarantee you what that wholesale rate is going to be.
Because the one page I'm looking at here is blank too on the
Sure.
screen. Is that, I don't want to assume, but is this the amount where the 2038 is going to be listed once the community's in, or is that?
Correct.
Okay.
Once you sign everything will be filled in once you sign the document.
So this is going to be, this sheet would, or a similar sheet would go in.
Correct. All the detailed information, and I think the technical committee and the lawyers all sat together and came up, and I think Eileen had a big part in that too. Did she leave me?
And so the follow-up question on the sheet
Sure.
is, with the 1% or ish increase over this period of time in between the 7 years and all the way up to 2038,
Sure.
is that, I'm assuming those rates can't be guaranteed anyways, even if they're in the contract, due to
No.
some of the language I'm reading in the contract.
I think what you can look at is because of the $500 million general plan that is already approved through Ohio EPA, that is a major construction program. I think you're going to find that there may be some smaller projects that come about. Something happens to a pump station, some distribution lines coming out to the contract community. Those are the type of projects you'll see along the way. I can't rule out the need for other capital improvements between now and 2038.
Okay. So I'm gonna read one line here, and context is everything in contrast, but on page 11 here, under section 5, which the water rates, billing, and collections and capital improvements, and show the water rates and the wholesale rate. And the bottom says here, the wholesale rate shall not be less than the first block rate, inclusive of the fixed rate cost. I'm not an attorney anymore, I'm going to pretend to be an attorney, so I'm hoping to get a little bit more of an explanation on the exact details of that line.
Correct.
So hopefully I'm looking at our law director over here who I think is an attorney.
When we went through these negotiations, and this was a point we discussed at several meetings, one of the main goals of the contracting communities, expressly, their staff brought this up as well, that in order to guarantee fairness, the contracting communities did not want to see decades down the road that they were paying in excess of what the inside rate of Toledo ratepayers were. So we wanted to put language within the contract that would preserve a true wholesale rate, and also put the onus on the city of Toledo that they could not raise the contracting community's wholesale rate without affecting their own individual inside ratepayers, with retail rate. So that's actually the purpose of that sentence that you read, that the wholesale rate shall be less than that first block retail rate affecting the city of Toledo and Lucas County. Second block being more of an economic development tool, but we're focusing on that inside rate for the city of Toledo and Lucas County.
So essentially this line here, this says wholesale cannot exceed this yellow line, this is the first block retail.
That's correct.
But they could take it up all the way to almost to it and have it at 99.
They can take it up, but the language within the contract does not prohibit them bringing it up to that, right up to that line, but they cannot exceed it. Anything that they were to do, they would have to also affect their inside ratepayers and effectively the people that vote them in office.
I would have you note also that based on the cost of service structure and in the exhibit, we clearly identify what the cost allocation is for each one of these items. So that essentially would prevent us from arbitrarily raising rates. That cost of service allocation formula is developed. It will be maintained and developed by the Regional Water Commission, and it's based on usage. It's based on what you actually use. So we really didn't ballpark anything. It's just here's what the allocation is based on some factor.
And I'm not saying that the commission would do this, but just asking that the city council could always come up and say that they wanted to, anytime 20 years down the road, different council, different group, you never know what happens, that you could want to increase it arbitrarily. And the reason there's actually two questions I have on here related to that before I get to that point. On Exhibit D, which you referenced, that shows the split and the breakdown. I noticed on the note, it says the split percentage shows allocations may change over time based on the changes in consumption patterns or infrastructure changes or additions. So the question I have with that is, let's say that the other surrounding areas are growing, they end up becoming larger users, and over time, I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but you're 30, we're hitting it, and let's say that the use of the retail is, say, 60-40 now, or 50-50. Would that still take is that language, and no, it's not really part of the language of the contract, but it's an exhibit, is that going to, let me read my notes here. I want to make sure I get this straight here. So can that wholesale rate exceed the retail rate based off of that configuration and the breakdown of the cost?
Again, our goal is to allocate costs based on whatever the factor is. Under a cost of service structure, it's highly unlikely. It's very highly unlikely that you will change consumption patterns so much that it alters the structure of the cost so that the wholesale is above the retail. The very basis of a cost of service structure is that retail cost, because we're using 100% of services that you're using none of. So again, it's a cost allocation. So maybe that cost breakout is 80-20. So you're only paying 20% of it already. You know, even though your consumption is going up, it's very unlikely. Very
So
unlikely.
I think right now it's at 71.8 and 28.2 from most of the, 10 to 12% increase could
Correct.
potentially happen, especially with the new Amazon facility going in some of the larger, but I don't know if they would fall under a different block
Yeah.
usage for some of these larger facilities. Some of the other questions I had on here related to this, sorry, I have arrows pointed all over the place here, so bear with me for a second. With the split, with the 71.8, is that just Toledo and Lucas County?
Yes.
Only?
Correct.
Those are the only two entities that are part of retail?
That is, we are the only two entities a part of the retail rate. And our large use customers, the Jeeps, the Sun Oils, those are your industrial rate customers. And what I'll say is they have a lower rate because it takes a lower cost to service them, because they're just essentially a straight pipe. We send them a bill, they pay us. There's not a lot of work we have to do to maintain that customer, so they naturally are going to get a lower rate.
And for those who don't know, I'll show them up here, that's the blue rate.
Sure.
Down here.
Yep, the lowest rate.
The other question with regards to retail, how much of that 71.8% is Toledo and how much of that is Lucas County?
Essentially, it's 60-12, somewhere in that area, 60% Toledo, so 11.8% Lucas County.
Okay.
And Lucas County is our largest customer.
Okay. And then with some of the changes that Toledo's making as well, as you mentioned, with getting rid of minimums, doing some more of the subsidization, the lead replacements. I'm assuming, and I want to make sure I get that clear, is that it's coming strictly from the retail rate on there.
Yeah, absolutely. All of the features of the retail system, again, we're going to monthly billing. We're going to eliminate the minimum. Instead, we're going to go to a small fixed fee. A lot of these features that we're looking at came out of our discussions with the community about the TAWA deal that was on the table. So we took very copious notes as far as what the community was asking for. They want to see our lead service lines replaced, even though we don't have a situation with lead whatsoever because of our treatment technique and how we coat the inside of our pipes, so you can't have a situation like Flint, which is why we're very adamant about not mixing foreign water into our piping system. So we have a very delicate system there, and we don't want to have anything in there to disrupt it. But those are all features of the retail rate. And if Toledo City Council and the mayor's office and the administration all agree that they want to fund $5 million worth of lead service line replacement a year, it's on the back of Toledoans and Lucas County residents. It has nothing to do with the contract communities.
Yeah. And that was something that was very clearly made clear by all the contracting parties to the city of Toledo, because that had been in prior agreements to the TAWA.
Sure.
And that was we all agreed that.
And that's been an appreciated negotiation.
Thank you.
One of the final questions I have, and this is probably more of a legal question as well. I think it's the final question I have. So many here, and I can't really keep track of my list here at this point, so I may end up coming back and asking a few more. I attended the public hearing and I attended the final vote for the city council. At the first public hearing that I attended, there was a comment that kind of raised an eyebrow from me. One of the council members made a statement that Toledo should be looking at charging fees to surrounding areas that supposedly pollute Lake Erie, that they in turn have to spend more to treat that. So what the question I wanted to know is, in this contract, does it limit, does it protect the contracting communities from having fees added on to rates? I know the rates are themselves, but if there was an additional tax or fee that was to be charged for something separate from the actual water, is that something that can be added onto the contract?
if so, it would not be a part of this contract. The language you sign in the contract as written are the four corners of the document. I can't comment on that as far as what that councilman was
Yeah, I
thinking,
understand.
but it will not be a part of this water.
So there's no fees that can be added on top of the rates?
It's a cost of service rate structure.
Correct, based on the cost of service that we have broken down within the contract. The Toledo City Council, the Regional Water Commission are all stuck to those confines.
Okay.
That's, if I may, that's one thing I just kind of want to clarify, that the key on this is from our perspective, is really what we've agreed to is a cost of service model. And one of the questions came up, I think you talked earlier about, well, what if City Council arbitrarily, raised the rate? Well, if they did that and there was not a basis for that in terms of a reasonable allocation on the cost of service, you'd really probably have a claim for breach, because it is a cost of service basis in terms of the contract.
Well, on that then, on page 13, under section C for the wholesale rates transition period, on part 2, it does say accordingly, Toledo shall have the right to amend water rates at any time, including without limitation the wholesale rate, as provided in the Toledo City Charter and the Toledo Municipal Code, subject to the limits and requirements of chapter 15, as may be necessary to satisfy the foregoing obligations. That is what I'm reading here. Says Toledo still has the right to make any changes. The Toledo City Council, the way I understand that, outside of the board.
We do but there, you still have the other provisions in the contract that says it's still a cost of service basis. That provision, again, was specifically put in by our bond counsel in terms of covering bond issues.
And then with the conversation regarding the actual board itself, can the regional board be dissolved by Toledo City Council or Toledo themselves if they wanted to?
No, there's actually, if you look at the end of the contract, there's a provision in there that says even if the charter would change, we've got a contract, this is a contract, the contract says that commission will be put together on the basis of the Charter Section 15 as it is now enacted. And even if the voters would change that charter enactment for the 40 years of this contract, that Regional Water Commission continues to exist under an impairment in contract theory. I mean, obviously you can go to court and, I don't know for sure what the results would be, but we actually put language in the contract to say that it would continue.
And that's what I'm reading here is N on page 34, that says charter amendments in the event that the Toledo City Charter is amended in any ways that impacts this uniform water agreement, including but not limited to the Regional Water Commission's role or the makeup of its members or other provisions of chapter. Charter Section 15 are as enacted, the terms of this agreement shall continue in full force regardless of said amendment until this agreement is terminated. So is there something that you point to that shows that if they were to dissolve it, that it still wouldn't change anything with regards to the rate structures or the, just for my...
Yeah, well, everything still functions the same way. So to the extent it functions under the contract with the Regional Water Commission and the constraints on council, and obviously the executive level of the city has really no say on the water rates, other than the recommendation from the DPU professionals in terms of what they should be. It really, the contract runs according to the contract as it's now instituted, including that charter provision, which creates that commission and authorizes that commission.
From the charter that they can arbitrarily correct
the commission still operates under the contract.
And that was the intent of us putting that language in there. So you still, as I pointed out, you still have the premise underneath contract law as to why the commission would meet. That's why we also spelled out what their authority was and what their roles and responsibilities were.
Sure, feedback's coming. I was hearing a little bit in there. So essentially the commission would still operate even if that charter was removed and that commission was technically disbanded by the city.
That's correct.
I don't think I have any other questions at the moment, but if I think of one, I'll be sure to ask. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Does anyone have any questions for Becky?
Sure. I just follow up on the, in case all the jurisdictions don't sign up, we have 45 days to make a decision. After that 45 days, if there is a jurisdiction that chooses not to go this direction, how long will it take for us to get the actual cost then of rates?
The model is already developed. It'll just take us to go back in the model. I would say no more than, I don't know if Warren got out of here now, but a day or two at the most, I would say. The model is already developed, so all you're doing is pulling out revenue. We'll understand what your revenue would have been, pull that out, rerun the model, and there you go. So it's not, all the work is pretty much done. And I'm speaking for the guy who does the work, so I'll step aside. Oh, I'm sorry, let's clarify it, within 5 days.
Thank you, that's all right. Jonathan asked actually.
I give him a lot more credit than he gives himself. I think he did good.
No, I'm just done. I just thought we were going down, so I just switched aside for a minute.
So I said Jonathan asked a couple of the questions that I had about.
Nice, think alike.
And it looks like, I did rough math, I mean, planned capital improvement projects you're doing between 19 and 23, is that like $348 million?
We're at the height of construction right now. I think on the document it says we're at about 244 million in invoices paid right now.
Yeah.
So between 19, where we're at now, we're at the height of the construction season, and we're well on our way, getting ready to launch one of the last biggest projects, which is the filter gallery project. There's going to be a lot of invoices flying out the door here in the next couple of years.
Well, to ask a question we sometimes get asked by our voters.
Sure.
Is this a highly unusual number over such a short period of time? Are we playing catch up? And when I say we, I'm going to say the city of Cleveland,
Sure.
we've been partners for decades.
Sure.
Are we playing catch up now?
This plan started in 2012. The general plan for improvements, the latest version of it, which pushed it up to $500 million, actually started in 2016. But the improvements at the plant actually started in 2012. And I think that original plan was $300 million over some extended period of time. So after working with Ohio EPA and naturally after the Do Not Drink advisory, the urgency was there. So yes, we condensed this whole thing. You look at Toledo Waterways Initiative from the city of Toledo, a comparable size program, $527 million, 18 years. We're doing $500 million in 10 years. So that yes, we are crunching time here and definitely piling a lot of improvements into a very short period of time. And as an example, look at what happened after the 2014 Do Not Drink advisory. We conceptualized, designed, and built multiple barriers of protection against HABs from 2014 before the 2015 Do Not Drink advisory. The 2015 HAB season started. It's almost unheard of in municipal government. So it's not just us. It was the help of Ohio EPA as well, our regulators. We had a lot of people from academia that just came into the picture and gave us great ideas on things that we can do to improve the system. So I would absolutely say we are crunching a lot of construction into a very short time period.
The only other question I have, will the Regional Water Commission have its own staff, employees and professionals, or are you going to rely on the staffs that obviously the city of Toledo has, and we have, and some of the other communities have? How's that going to work?
Well, we have talked with the lawyers of the group also. We're going to have to develop some bylaws for the commission. I'm now starting to think about space. How do we hold our public hearings? I talked to my staff today. There's a potential of us being able to do it maybe by the middle of next year out at the water treatment plant. We have a brand new conference room out there. But I think we'll have to really figure that part of it out. We'll have to figure out as a group what our needs are and then how do we address it. But I think a lot of those resources will come from Toledo Department of Public Utilities.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Martin?
I love going last because everyone asks all the questions already for me. But I think, well, just back to the redundancy, your plan is by the end of 2020 to have that plan in place.
Correct.
I remember
it has to be submitted to Ohio EPA.
Yes. Just what does that equal in, when would maybe a second intake be built? What year? How long would that?
And I can defer to Warren on that already have specific dates built into the model as far as when that debt service will start, but Warren carries that stuff in his head and not the answer.
And the elevated storage as well.
Exactly.
The elevated storage, looking at probably 2024, as far as the actual construction, initiation of construction. Maybe a little year sooner, but around 23, 24, I would say. As far as the alternate water source in Lake Erie, if we get into a crib situation, really we're looking at debt service starting in 26, as I recall. So that would put it into 25 construction period. So time to develop the plans. If we're looking at alternative source at a different location, then you get into property acquisition issues. And then there's delays associated with the whole property side, with getting the public funding in place, getting hearings and everything cleared out. And then you can start with certainty develop your plans and specifications. So it takes a little bit longer. You're developing a new facility on a new piece of ground that you don't own.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. This is maybe a legal thing. On page 25, section 11, D. If I'm reading this right, it says if say one of the other communities drop out for any reason or breach or get out, does that affect our rate structure and everyone else's?
Sure. Okay, so section D that you're referencing is in the event of one or more other water purchase and supply agreements between Toledo and other contracting jurisdictions are terminated, Toledo and the contracting jurisdiction shall continue to be bound by the terms of the agreement and any amendments thereto. So the Uniform Water Agreement would survive between the city of Harrisburg and the city of Toledo in the event that, say, the city of Sylvania dropped out. What we will end up probably seeing, and this will be a technical question, but moving forward, we will probably see some influence on the cost of service model because what you're doing is Toledo will be losing a customer. So similar to what will happen 45 days, I think our deadline's October 18th, we're going to see these rates fluctuate based on who's in and who's out. So throughout the term of the 40 years, well, one party may drop out, and there's legal remedies then if that happens. However, you probably will see a little bit of fluctuation there, but it also depends on who that community is and what their supply and consumption is.
Sure.
Obviously, if it's a smaller consumer, the effect is not going to be significant.
If you look at it as a 9-slice pie, you pull one slice out, every other slice gets a little bigger, so that's your consumption. It will get a little bigger, which means your rates may go up.
That's such a better answer than what you're
And vice versa, if you add another slice in, every one slice gets a little smaller, right?
But we're okay as long as it's not Lucas County that drops out, right?
Correct. We need Lucas County.
All right. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Jim, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. Just generally speaking, what was the impetus for the change in the way you wanted to charge customers?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you,
In
sir.
general terms, what was the impetus for the change in the way you wanted to charge your customers?
Well, essentially it started back when I took over the position 5.5 years ago. The people who were already in the utility kind of explained the regional water concept. I think Team Cog was going out and doing the rate study at the time, so they were explaining the regional water concept to me. And essentially, my response was, what's so bad about that? We should, I have a business, I have an MBA, an executive MBA, so I understand business concepts. If you're gonna keep your customers happy, then you need to treat them fairly. And basically, that's what it comes down. My philosophy is treat your customers fairly, and you'll have a good relationship.
So is it safe to say that the proposal here is treating the customers more fairly than the way they have been treated in the past?
I think that's a fair estimate based on a cost of service structure.
Okay. Who oversees compliance with the contract? And, what I'm getting at is, are there officials that are responsible for compliance? And if so, how are they accountable for that responsibility? To whom are they accountable?
I would say our law department is responsible for compliance of legal documents. As far as, well, if you're talking something, if you're talking just strictly legalities, the four corners of the contract, in our law department is responsible for ensuring.
What I'm getting at is, who's responsible and accountable to the city of Perrysburg to make sure that we're getting charged the right rate?
Your representative on the Regional Water Commission. It would be your representative on the Regional Water Commission. That's what they're there for, to ensure that everything we agree to do is common to everyone and everyone's in agreement with what we're moving forward as far as improving infrastructure wise.
So it would be up to our representative to audit your calculations.
That's what the commission's duties are, is to look over the books of the utility.
It is, it's also provided for, I believe, within the, and Eileen, she's still back here, just correct me on this, but I think it's also provided in the responsibilities that the city of Toledo has to the commission. The commission has the right to ask for and receive financial reports, infrastructure reports, so those fall within the rights and responsibilities of the commission, not only within the contract, but it's charter. So where Mr. Moore is referencing our delegate, I think it's going to be imperative on any contracting community through, like in our situation, our utilities committee, to get that reporting and examine that reporting and ask questions about that reporting so that the council is satisfied that the contract's being followed.
I think we assume everybody's responsible. That would be the case. So when you say the commission, does it require a majority vote of the commission to do that, or could just our own delegate unilaterally say, I want to do that?
Our delegate could request that, and I would believe that it would have to be provided.
It's our intent also to have regular meetings of the committee, and at least once a year, the utility should come in and say, open up the books, here's our expenses, here's what we're doing. And again, it applies from the Regional Water Commission on the wholesale rate. Things we do on the retail rate as far as, like I said, develop these customer service programs. Obviously, the commission is not going to have a great interest in that stuff because they don't have any financial consequences of those decisions.
I appreciate it's everybody's intent, but this is how long is this agreement? 40 years?
40 years.
None of us are going to be here. Probably 20 years from now, maybe 15. And some are, maybe not 10 years from now. So, well, it's our intent now. People change.
Absolutely. That's why some of the provisions were put
I want
on
to
the
make sure we were
table.
sitting in my chair 10 years from now. That's one of the things that I was doing 10 years ago.
Think about it every day.
Thank you. That's all I have to
I do have one other thing here real quick, if you don't mind, I forgot. To just have a discussion here on is on page 26 as well, under section 12, determination renewal, part P, responsibility for proportionate share of common to all outstanding debt. I just want to make everyone aware of this. It says that Toledo and the contracting jurisdiction agree that if, as of the expiration date or termination date, as defined by section 12B, there is outstanding common to all Toledo water system debt that was incurred on or after the effective date of this agreement for common to all improvements recommended by the Regional Water Commission or mandated by an EPA or included in a plan approved by an EPA, the contracting jurisdiction shall pay to Toledo amounts necessary to provide for the payment of the contracting jurisdictional proportional share of such outstanding debt. So essentially, if I understand that correctly, if in year 40, if Perrysburg was to not renew that agreement, whether they built their own plant, whether Perrysburg goes and purchases from Bowling Green or another option, that if Perrysburg was to leave and there's any outstanding debt, Perrysburg would have to pay that proportional share of that debt in order to leave, whether we non-renew this or not. Am I correct in that?
So, Councilman Smith, if your interpretation is correct, it does have to be read in conjunction with section F, the notice not to renew. So what we did when drafting this agreement is we put in the 33rd anniversary as being our target date. We need to start negotiations for a successor agreement according to the terms of this agreement no later than year 30. That gives the parties a 3-year window as we're working on the successor agreement. If a contracting community provides notice to the city of Toledo by year 33 that we will not be renewing this 40-year agreement, then any debt incurred by the city of Toledo, even if recommended by the Regional Water Commission, any debt incurred after year 33 to year 40 would not be applicable to the community that chooses not to renew. So the contracting communities have responsibilities on themselves as well to be able to protect their own destiny and their own future as it relates to this. If there is no notice not to renew, if we all make it to year 40, yes, your interpretation of this is correct. But come year 30, we start renegotiating, and come year 33, we have a decision to make, and that's going to be whether or not we're going to stay or we're going to go. If we stay, we then would be subject to taking on our proportionate share of the Commonwealth debt. That is actually, that's a Perrysburg provision. I would say we argued for that one pretty
It
much.
still would protect year 32 or 31 if there's a $100 million
You are
debt.
correct. You are
You're almost
correct.
kind of stuck at that point.
And again, we put a lot of emphasis on the role of the Regional Water Commission and the work that they need to do every year of this contract, because they have to be planning for the future, not just the capital improvements that are already in hopper, say for the next 10 years. But it is an important role. It is a level of decision-making and authority that the city of Perrysburg or any contracting community has not previously enjoyed. So having that representation, having that role on the commission, and having a say in what is going to be the future of the plant and the future of the infrastructure, I can't oversell it enough. It's very important. And it is the role of that delegate to say, we aren't going to let anything get to year 32, because by year 33, we may want out.
You can't stop the EPA though from making a mandate.
You absolutely cannot.
But I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that they had not read through that themselves. So thank you.
Any other questions from council? Well, thanks very much. We appreciate your time and your expertise, and your entire team for providing a lot of resources and information to answer council's does its due diligence. So we very much appreciate those efforts.
Thank you.
Your efforts. That's entire city of Toledo for negotiating the contracts.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Any other questions regarding this council meeting?
I do actually have a question that what I'm looking at everyone in the council here at this point. What do you want our next step to be? Do we want this to go to the Public Utilities Committee? Are we interested in having another committee of the whole? And if it does come to a vote on what we're going to do, whether it's going to Bowling Green or going to Toledo, would we be better off having that as a special meeting specifically for that vote, or would it be more appropriate during a regular council meeting?
I think I asked the gentleman, Jonathan Henry, to do a little homework for me. I don't know if he's going to provide some additional information that I have there.
Okay, I don't disagree. That's what I'm wondering is, should we
So
send
I guess
this?
it's up to how long it would take you to put together some of that stuff. You have a suggestion?
Offhand, let me think about it. Let me look at it a little bit.
He said 5 days would be best. Okay, like, if you just let us know. He said, like, just has that, like, have that information.
I don't disagree. I would like to have the information as
What's
well.
the next step? What is-
Our next Public Utilities Committee meeting is going to be the 25th at 6 p.m. And then we have 2 council meetings on the 1st and the 15th prior to the October 18th deadline. We're giving the decision to do.
I think you can do it for the 25th.
I don't know that. Let me look into it.
I don't want, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna hold you to it, but if it's possible.
It may be difficult for me to be here because I'm to speak in long at the same time on the same.
Well, that's fine. You can just get us the information.
I don't know if there's any question. I'm sure we can probably submit instead of making you have to get stuck in traffic on your way to get out here.
Less likely, I guess. Yeah. And let us sort of collect all the comments from tonight and let's see what everybody else knows about it.
I'd say we shoot for the committee.
To sure to have it. So do we want to bring this to the committee? I know we're having a committee of the whole for this. I'm just curious if it would be more appropriate to have further discussions as a group, or do we want to do that? Or have, I don't mind coming to my committee, but I just want to know what the appetite of the rest of the council is.
The date we're looking at voting again is
we had the vote, if we're going to be making a motion for either one, it would have to probably be before October 18th.
So we have to do the first and the 15th.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that if we were to do a vote, we'd be looking at the 15th, otherwise we have to schedule a special council meeting.
Are we planning to have 3 readings? I'm sorry. Was it the will of council to have 3 readings on this?
Look around to see what everyone wants. It may be appropriate.
That's why.
Yeah, we could bring it to the public utilities committee just for public input discussion on it. But I would prefer to everyone in council to hear what's going on, what the public wants to hear versus just 3 of us.
We can additionally place it on the agenda for the first, even if you want to have a first reading. You don't have time currently to have 3 readings and be able to satisfy Toledo's deadline of October 18th. But if it's council's desire, we can place it on the agenda on the first, and even have a first reading, and on the 15th, you could pass it on the, or consider it, I should say, on the second reading, waiting the third.
Would it be,
That gives as much public input as you have.
so would it be inappropriate to have either option as a first reading?
I don't have an agreement from the city of Bowling Green.
No.
All we have is a study.
Okay.
I don't have an agreement to put in front of you. The city of Bowling Green has not offered us an agreement.
The board has intentionally not submitted it off to us.
I understand it just they don't want to get, it's not clear, it's just trying to pull away, but from the conversations that at least I've had at the plant, I know that the people in the plant were interested.
So it's going to your committee, I guess.
I guess so. Okay.
Well, I guess how I offer this goes to your committee. Next week is what you're planning to do.
Yeah,
If it goes to committee, that would be another public arena.
yes,
And then
I don't mind
first,
it.
we want to have a reading on the first and then have the vote on the 15th. That would be 3 separate.
I just want to make sure that if any council member can be there for that, because I think it's important to hear from the public with as much as we can on the comments they have.
Just for council's notification, Monroe Commissioners vote to approve the regional water agreement, so you got that going for it.
Jonathan, your committee date and time for your meeting?
September 25th at 6 p.m. How much talking, so are we, assuming we're done with the meeting?
The suggestion that Becky needed for
So we should go into a recess for a few minutes before we actually start.
We're going to adjourn this meeting, and Council, how long would you like that before? 10 minutes?